So on this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how Unai Emery is reinventing Aston Villa and how we are tactically evolving year on year under Unai Emery. So Earl, you've done some wonderful graphics as always, and we're going to really take a look and compare Villa from 11 games in last year to this year, but also take a look at some of the passing networks, areas of influence, key passes, unsuccessful passes, etc. So, how do you feel like, in general, we are evolving under Unai Emery? Because I think sometimes you can forget of how successful Unai Emery has been. He won 7 trophies in 2 years at PSG. He won 3 Europa Leagues in a row at Seville, beat Jurgen Klopp's side in that time. He won the Europa League at Villarreal, guided Villarreal to the semi-final of the Champions League. So I think Aston Villa under Unai Emery, we've always mentioned that we are by far from the finished article. And I think this shows within this season currently, 11 games in, that we're far from the finished article. We are evolving as a team. And to just rinse and repeat from last year, the same tactics, I don't feel like that's Unai Emery. I feel like the Unai Emery team that he wants to get to is going to be something like 2 or 4 years in the making until he finally gets the side what he wants recruitment-wise, with younger players coming through as well. But to give him that confidence that he knows that he can do his style week in, week out. And I think we aren't that team right now. And I don't think we were ever going to be that team either at this moment in time.
Yeah, well, I think Emery is the kind of manager who will always get the best out of the players that he's got. And obviously inherited, most of the team. And as we progress and as we're adding to that every transfer window, and he's kind of bringing in different players, we'll get closer to his vision and the team that he wants. So I think the style that we've been playing is down to the players that we have and getting the best out of them. We'll continue to bring in those Emery players, and I think we'll see that evolution, see things change into closer to how he wants the team to look.
Yeah, I think within his mindset and within his style and within his philosophy, generally he does always play the 4-2-3-1 or the 4-4-2s. Those two formations make up everything that he's really done at Villarreal, Seville, Aston Villa. You can take a look at his time at PSG, which was more of a 4-3-3. I look at that and think that's possibly because he's got far superior players for what that league showed. So he was able to probably express his side in a little bit of a different way. So we're going to take a look at last season. We're going to take a look at this season, because I think one of the big fundamental things for me is that the way that we play has changed from last year. We are doing things differently from last year to this year. And what I mentioned earlier about with Emery, it's not rinse, repeat, same tactics, same format, season in, season out. He's looking for perfection. He's a perfectionist, and he wants us to be at the pinnacle of English football. And to get there will take time, and it will have to evolve. And I think this is what we're starting to see. So I'll let you take the reins on this graphic, and then we'll have a discussion about what we can see, and then we'll move on to what we've been seeing this year as well. Then, so talk me through the first network then of last season. What were we seeing, and what were the big standout things?
Yeah, so what I've done, I've gone through kind of the usual graphics that we do, comparing. Well, first of all, I've done last season, like you can see on screen here, and this is based on the first 11 games of last season, and then I've gone through and done the same again for this season as well. So starting off with the passing network, you can see a lot of build up through the back, a lot of passes. You know, Luis, Kamara, Torres, Conte, etc. And then you've got kind of McGinn coming inside off the left, and you've then got Diaby as well, quite close to Watkins, and that's kind of forming your box midfield, like you say.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to take a look at is build up and how are we building up from the back, because we are a team that play out from the back. We are a team that want control, and the way in which you can build gives you that control with the actual shape of your team. And I think the biggest thing to note here is that the biggest combination last season in the first 11 games was Torres to Luke Dean. Now, this highlights especially the importance of our left-hand side. An Unai Emery Aston Villa side uses that left-hand side. So what you'll find is that your left back becomes the left winger, and your right side is going to be Leon Bailey, who becomes the right-sided winger on that side as well. And then McGinn and Diaby were tucking inside a little bit, playing that little bit narrower, which then offers the width out wide. So that top combination there between Pau and Digne shows that that's the makeup of the build-up. Now, if you look at Douglas Luiz, who was vitally important to the Emery system last year, the first time that he reaches the ball off a top combination is Conte to Luiz, which was at 36. So for somebody who you'd expect to have been the one that was sort of receiving the ball quite frequent, quite often, I don't think that was as frequent as what I actually thought he was getting on the ball. So I think that's interesting within itself. But you can see the general makeup. You've got the double pivot with Kamara, and you've got Douglas Luiz in there as well. And then, like Earl explained, we've got the different combinations of players coming inside. Now, if we take a look at this season, and this is something that I've spotted and I want to take a look at and show you how different it is to last year, and it's not the same. You know, we go to that first element of Pau Torres to Luca Dean. Now, if we take a look at it this season, we are sitting, this is our fifth highest combination at 39%. Now, that combination was in the 60s last season. So this already now starts to paint a different picture of how we're playing and how we're building up, because the biggest combination is Pau Torres into Tielemans at 64%. And that's a stark difference between going out wide to going now into central midfield. And what I think this allows us to do is it should allow us to have more control, because you're allowing time for Luca Dean to get set, make his position correct, and then allow him to take that step further forward, because he knows that the ball's going into Tielemans, and then it's either going to go into Luca Dean. And then if we take a look at the combination now, you can see that Tielemans to Luca Dean is a pretty high combination at 36%. So I think this is already starting to paint a bit of a picture. Left-hand side heavy, because we're going into Tielemans, Luca Dean, into Ramsey as well. And Pau's going into Tielemans, and Pau's going into Martinez. He's going into Digne as well. So I think that combination does show a lot. So what are your findings from this passing network from this season?
Yeah, I think one that jumps out to me a lot is the difference between Rodgers and Moussa Diaby. So obviously there you can see 27 Rodgers. He's quite a bit deeper than what Diaby was in the last. Yeah, so Diaby was around there, wasn't he? Right next to Watkins. So it's a bit of a different shape. You can see it's kind of like with Rodgers in there, it's almost like a three in midfield, where it was a bit more like a box last season. And obviously we've then got Rodgers, who's coming deep and looking to collect the ball and drive us forward. So yeah, slight difference there. Obviously, the right hand side is not looking as established as the left hand side as what we've had this season. Obviously, Onana coming in, he's learning the role, learning his teammates, and then we've not kind of had stability in the right back position, which is then going to affect Leon Bailey as well on the right, or John McGinn, whoever it is. So yeah, a little bit different to last season. I do like your point about it kind of going into Tielemans more often. It actually quite kind of helped Luca Dean as well. He's not had to kind of carry that load in the build up.
And I think that we will touch on Mr. Bailey, because I think it's an important part to talk about. But if you actually look at his positioning as well, he's also coming inside a little bit more. And I think that's something, and that's a little bit of a shift within the Aston Villa system of what we're seeing as well. So again, you go back to last season and you can compare Bailey to this season. He's a little bit higher, but he's a little bit more inside. So I think there's something within this system that wants to get Bailey inside a little bit more. So I think now, if we take a look at last season, and this is probably the most alarming graphic I think Earl's done, and this shows the passing areas. So if anyone's new, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so the purpose of these graphics, I'm trying to kind of show the areas in the pitch where the team are trying to get the ball. So it's a heat map showing the end locations of passes, so where passes are going into. So as you can see on this graphic, last season it's pretty balanced between the kind of the central areas and build up, which is where you have your Louise, Kamara, and then pretty balanced, like I say, between the left and the right side.
Yeah, and I think it is balanced. I think you've got a bit of depth in sort of your own half a little bit. And I think when we're sort of looking at it from this season, you can really see that we are severely lacking on that right-hand side. There's also that little bit of a lack of depth in our own half, isn't there?
Yeah, so I mean, you could take it as a positive. We're playing a lot more within the opposition half. I'd say you can see from this graphic, it's very heavily on the left-hand side, which is where you've got your Pau Torres and Yuri Tielemans, which we saw from the passing network. They're kind of the top combining players, so it makes sense that those are the highest volume areas that we're seeing.
You are talking sense, Earl, because that leads us on to the next graphic, where we can see where defenders are sort of having their influence and picking up the ball and the areas that they're really playing within. And again, you'd expect to see Luca Dean going further forward, which we did last season. Matty Cash sometimes tucking, sometimes going forward. But if you really compare it to this season, we've got more I'm going to say like gravitas to step up. Like, I feel like we've come a long way here, that our defenders are comfortable pushing further forward. And I think that's big, that is, I think.
Yeah, I think you'd say, defensively the line isn't as high as last season, but I think with the ball we're getting a lot further into their half. You can see most of all with Carlos and Consa, they're quite a lot further higher, further up the pitch, higher up the pitch than they were last season, and even Torres is as well. Torres is getting slightly wider as well. But yeah, it is a little bit different. Everything's kind of shifted up this season,
which I think you would kind of expect as a team grows and gets more confident, and we start playing within the opposition half more. I think that's something that we are looking to do. Like, we are a possession-based side that really want to dictate possession, and I think if that's the case, then everyone should be stepping up, going further forward, and you can see this, because if we were a possession-based side and these players were further back, you would then have bigger gaps between the lines of each area, such as midfield and the forward line as well. So I think if we take a look at something again that is different, it's that double pivot, it's that midfield, it's what's being asked of the midfield too. You know, last year it was very much Kamara screening, Douglas Luiz tempo setter, sort of getting on it, rolling, going left. No, we're going to go right. And he got that little bit of Brazilian swagger about him, hadn't he? And I think this year you can see that there's more depth to that midfield too. You know, that midfield too of a double pivot that are sitting in there. Sometimes they're up against a three and they're outnumbered, but you can see again that the amount of ground that's being covered. But I'm actually quite surprised that how much ground Onana is actually covering, playing on that right-hand side. He's got real depth to that area, where I think if you go to last year with Kamara, you know, he's probably going in a little bit more central, isn't he? Where the two of them are sort of saying that you're left, I'm right. We've got a little bit of a crossover in the middle. So I think this is quite interesting, really, because I know we've had discussions before, and I don't see Onana being on this right hand side forever, and I think he'll move around. But I think this is quite interesting in itself. I mean, I never thought I'd find a central midfield pairing that fascinating, but I'm actually quite fascinated by it.
Yeah, it's quite a different dynamic between Tielemans and Onana compared to Luiz and Kamara last season, and it's consistent with kind of the evolution of the rest of the team. Like you say, with Luiz and Kamara, the influence was a lot more pronounced in our own half, and that's because they're involved in the building of play and stuff through the back. Whereas this season it's more about kind of get Tielemans on the ball, and then we've got runners off him looking to kind of run through the opposition team a bit more. Compared to last season, we're a bit more passing to the opposition team. But yeah, we had last season as well. It was kind of Kamara in those central areas, and then once we get into the opposition half and the opposition final third, he's then kind of covering towards the right a bit more, where we, that give license to Matty Cash maybe to overlap, and he's kind of covering those areas. Probably something we'd look at Onana to do a bit more, but like you say, he's a bit more box to box. Obviously, he'll have a lot more touches in the opposition box as well from set pieces and that sort of thing. But he is definitely a lot more box to box. And then you've got Tielemans, who is kind of getting into those more advanced areas as well. He's, as we saw, is heavily involved in the build up, but then getting into those advanced areas and then slightly wide into those left half spaces. Whereas Douglas Luiz was probably a bit more central, a bit more likely to crop up on the right side, maybe a bit more, like you say, a bit more overlap.
Yeah, and then moving further forward into the most dynamic, should we say, part of our team, and we'll take a look at the front four from last year: McGinn, Watkins, Diaby, and Bailey. Things to note is that McGinn was covering a lot of ground on that left-hand side, coming inside quite a lot. We've got Bailey hugging the touchline more. We've got Diaby dropping a little bit deeper, but staying close to Watkins. And I'll let you break down what you can see from this season. And it is different as well.
Yeah, it is quite different. I think the main difference for me is is Diaby versus Rodgers, and obviously they are, quite different players. But I think it's the positioning of Diaby versus the positioning of Rodgers, which has had the effect on the rest of the players, I think. So if you go back to last season, Luke, you can see with Diaby, like you say, he's quite close to Watkins, but he's definitely more right side, favours the right side more. And obviously that's because of his history as a right winger, probably. And because he's got that tendency of kind of moving to the right a bit more, maybe that had the influence on Bailey, but for spacing purposes, that he's kind of sticking to the touchline more. Whereas with Rodgers this season, he's obviously a bit more central. Maybe that's given a bit more space for Bailey to drift inside a little bit more, potentially. You've got the second difference as well, which I think Rodgers likes to come a bit deeper, collect the ball and carry it forward. That's kind of had a little bit of change in Watkins' position, I think, as well, because Diaby is close to Watkins. I think he's a bit more. Watkins is a bit more to the left and Diaby's to the right, whereas this season it's a bit more Rodgers is behind Watkins, and the both so allows him to be a bit more central. And then with McGinn, obviously he was on the left last season with Ramsey out, and then this season he's kind of been everywhere, really, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think the big thing that while you're talking has got me thinking a little bit more, and it's about Diaby compared to Rodgers, is that I think what's happening is, and this is what I think needs to be happening with us now, is that, for example, we can all see now that Rodgers and Watkins aren't as close as what Diaby and Watkins were. So there's a distance there. There's a distance between the two. And I think what we did see last year was a little bit of sometimes that link up between Diaby sort of going out wide and Bailey sort of going into Diaby's position. There was that little bit of a rotation at times. There was that little bit of a link up. And I do think it is a little bit about distances, because I think if Rodgers is picking up the ball, and we all know that if Rodgers picks up the ball somewhere there and he's turned his man, he's driving forward, that is the area that I want Rodgers to be in, because I think that's where he can do the damage. And the more I'm thinking about it now, the more I'm thinking that when Rodgers gets his head up, the only player he can really tend to look for is probably Watkins. And that distance might be quite big. And if you're looking at that distance and you're thinking he might be being doubled up on by, say, a Van Dijk or a Konate in that instance. So it's very difficult for him to either pick that pass, find that pass, or find Watkins in a good area. Now, what I do think probably has got to happen, and I think it is part of the plan, is that I think Bailey has got to go into that area a little bit more. And I think you can see from the graphic that you've done that last season, his heat map was around there. He was just heavy in that area, whereas this season you can now see we're venturing into that area a little bit through there. So I do think probably there's got to be a little bit more of a link-up combinational play, but tactical element to it of if, say, Rodgers gets the ball a bit deep, where's Bailey? Bailey, to me now, I think sometimes if Rodgers has picked up the ball here, we don't need Bailey here. We need Bailey in and around here, where he's adding the numbers and either dragging a defender to him, which is giving Watkins more space. So I do think that there is something in there a little bit, I think, personally. I mean, I've just thought of this off the top of my head, so I might be chatting rubbish, but what do you think?
No, I completely agree. And I think the reason that's maybe not happening is because we lack that width on the right-hand side coming from the fullback. So if you've got Bailey making those kind of diagonal runs inside, ahead of Rodgers, like you're saying, you need that width then to come from the fullback overlapping. Now, probably it's because of injury, with Matty Cash being out, and we've had Konsa at right back a lot of the time. Konsa's not going to be the one that's overlapping. That's not his skill set. He's got a lot of skills, but that's probably not one of them. So maybe if you had like a Cash in the side who's then overlapping, might give Bailey a bit of help to do that kind of thing, because at the minute he's kind of having to hold the width, but also probably need him to come aside a bit, like you say. So, but then again, that comes down to as well what I was saying last time I was on, where maybe you could then have like a Kamara dropping in. So we have the kind of the back three at the minute with Torres, Carlos, and Konsa. If you have like a Kamara dropping into the back three, that then gives your fullback more license to get forward. So it's all kind of interlinks, I think, and it's probably because of injury that it's not happened. But that's how I think we're going to see things changing.
Yeah, I think it's vitally important that Cash is fit. I think because of the difference between Konsa and Cash at right back. It's not only physical; it's what they can offer within that role, and I think you're getting two different things, but depending on which one plays. And I think for the actual system, I think against most teams, it probably is Cash, because he's the one that can offer that more width on that right hand side. So, talk to me about the next one. We've got sort of two more graphics to go with then. So this one's high ball wins.
Yeah, so this is showing how effective the team is at pressing, I guess, winning the ball high up the pitch. So I've just taken ball recoveries, tackles, interceptions within the opposition half. Successful only, so only successful tackles. And then you've got the two different colours. So yellow are just successful actions, and then the green ones are actions that led to a shot within 30 seconds. So winning the ball and then getting a shot from that within 30 seconds. So I mean, we've never really under Unai Emery been a high pressing team, I would say. So it's probably not something that shows up the most for us. But I think we were doing it a bit more last season compared to this season, kind of winning the ball back higher up the pitch.
Yeah, I think a high line will always help with that, because the distance between the defense and the attack is closer together. But I will say something about our press, and sometimes it can probably get a little bit overlooked of what our press is. We like most teams, and I talk about this sometimes when we've conceded a goal, and I'll talk about stopping the goal before it gets to the last person that's either not tracked a runner, etc. And it's that Watkins will always generally press from in to out. So you'll generally always see Watkins running towards a central defender or running towards a fullback that's gone out wide, because what we want to do is we want that ball to go into these wide areas, the areas that we want to force the opposition to go into. And I think if you do look at this general graphic, that it is a lot more denser within those wide areas. I think centrally it's not too bad. So that shows that when we are pressing, we are trying to force the opposition to go out wide. So this season, again, I'd say obviously, are we lower or higher? We're lower, aren't we? Yeah, so we're lower. But again, the areas where we're sort of forcing them to go, we're able to win the ball back, aren't we? So again, you can see that area there and that area there, we're actually winning the ball back.
Yeah, I think the first point that you made is very true. I think it comes down to the height of the defense overall. So last season the line was higher, so by default we're probably going to win the ball a little bit higher up the pitch. But yeah, like you say, kind of trying to filter the opposition out wide, win the ball back. So if they're out wide, kind of leave the space in the middle. So when you win the ball back, you'd hope that there'd be more space in the middle for you to attack. But yeah, I think that the main thing for me on this one is the number of the high ball wins that lead into a shot, and that's slightly down as well from last season. So I think it's about winning the ball back, but then also turning that into a chance for us.
I know one of your big bugbears this year is that we don't shoot enough, and we don't shoot probably from distance enough. So that probably ties in with something that you've been talking about all season, really.
Yeah, it's a very big point for me. So last season in the first 11 games, we were averaging 15.1 shots per game, which is good, quite a lot. And even then, I thought we might need to shoot more. But yeah, this season we're at 12.4 per game, so almost 3 fewer shots per game, which is quite significant for me. Yeah, and I always say I would like to see us shoot more.
Definitely. I agree with you. Right, so the final one then. And this is one where I think we need to... I think on both seasons, like you're talking about, we need to get more shots off. I think we get into some very, very good areas and we don't capitalise enough. What was that? Was it the Bournemouth game, the last game at home, where we were creating so much, like really good moments, and it's just not coming off. Like, we're just not punishing teams. We're not finishing the teams off. We're not taking our chances. And in the Premier League, you just fundamentally, you can't do it. So this is a graphic that I wanted you to design, and you've been able to design it. So talk us through it, because I think it shows that really.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of fans, myself included, were kind of looking for something like this. So what I'm trying to do here is assess the quality of the team's final ball, and I think most Villa fans would say we've been feeling that's been lacking at times, kind of the quality of that final pass. So this is passes into the box, and I've cut the pitch down into just the final third. The top graph is successful passes into the box, and then the second one there is unsuccessful. So I've just separated them out because it's already pretty hectic with a lot of passes over 11 games. So I just tried to separate them out to make it a little bit easier to see. It is easier to see over one game, but this is 11 here. So the yellow passes are successful passes into the box, and then similar to the last one, the green passes or key passes for what I've said. So passes into the box that have led to a shot within 5 seconds. And as you can see from the graphic, the table on the right hand side there, we had 40 key passes over those 11 games. And then the ratio between successful and unsuccessful was 46%, so a bit less than half. And then when you compare that to this season, so the key passes there has gone down from 40 to 31. So, like you say, kind of these passes are not resulting in shots, and whether that's players just not shooting. Go back to my previous point where I just want us to shoot more at times, but also the ratio there between successful and unsuccessful passes into the box, 44.5%. So it's a 1.5% difference, 46% versus 44.5. Now that 1.5%, might seem not a lot, 1.5%, but it is actually quite significant, I think. And it's these fine margins in the Premier League, isn't it? That 1.5% difference passes into the box can make a lot of difference.
100%. And I think we've just got to make sure that those moments are big moments and key moments. So I think that's been a real good insight into the difference between last season and this season. And I think also the difference in comparing and looking at some of the things that we were doing and comparing it to last year. And we're not actually sometimes trying to do those things anymore. We've evolved into something a little bit different. And I think we can all agree that there are some things that need to get better. There are some positions that need to get better. And I have full confidence that we will be able to do it. There's no doubt in my mind, because like what we spoke about earlier of how meticulous, how perfect Emery is, how he wants everything to be. I think it's just about fine tuning. I think it's about players sort of raising their levels a little bit and just getting back on track. And I think sometimes an international break is the worst thing, which is we've probably seen this week. And sometimes it's perfect. John McGinn scoring a goal for Scotland, Morgan Rogers, Sammy getting an assist, getting his first England appearance, Ollie Watkins scoring a goal for England. Those players will come back full of life, buzzing, confident, raring and ready to go. So they've had the perfect reset for me. And then you've got the other little rumours of Maatsen pulled out of the Netherlands squad, Pau pulled out the Spanish squad, Konsa got injured, a hip injury for England. I'm going to ask you though, Earl. There are two players that I'm very surprised were even allowed to go on international duty. And that's Onana and Bailey, really. Because Onana, for me, has been struggling to finish games for Villa. He's been coming off at half-time tactically and niggles. We know that Tielemans was fully rested and didn't go on international duty. But Onana to go, that felt weird to me at the time. And now he's done he's got a tear in his foot, so he's out for 2 to 3 weeks. So that one feels a bit weird. And also Bailey, the thing of Bailey not being fit and carrying an injury, that's not true then, is it? Because if he was, he wouldn't have gone. So I just find those two were a little bit weird that they've gone on international duty.
Yeah, I think with Onana, you could see something was coming. I mean, it felt like an injury was coming. So, like you say, I'm surprised that he wasn't managed a bit better. He went there and he played the full 90 as well, I think, didn't he, for Belgium? So I was quite surprised at that as well. Bailey's an interesting one. I'm still convinced that he's not fit, but maybe he is, and it's just a confidence thing, and maybe going to Jamaica and playing for Jamaica, and hopefully maybe getting a goal, getting an assist, maybe that might give him a kickstart. So yeah, only the club will know really, and Bailey. So I was pretty convinced, like I say, that he's not right. He doesn't look right. Must be an injury was my opinion, but yeah, maybe it might be a confidence thing. Who knows?
Maybe he just really wanted to play Steve McLaren ball. Maybe he's really want. Maybe he's grew up thinking, you know what? I've always wanted to play for Steve McLaren. So you never know. It might have been a dream for him. But I think especially with Bailey and Jamaica, that there's a lot of politics involved in it. I remember when I interviewed his dad, his stepdad, Craig Butler, and he was. I interviewed him, and then we mentioned Jamaica, and I was like, "Oh my god, I wish I never asked." And he just went off on one about sort of like the JFF or something like that. Yeah, the Jamaican Football Federation and the politics between, and Bailey wanting to play, and within that setup. So I think there's something probably to do with that, really. As well, that really made him go. And I think a lot of these injuries are probably precautions. They're probably all fine. Like I imagine Matson's okay, etc. But yeah, I look at sort of like England and the players that didn't go. Was it sort of Colwill played the whole game against Arsenal and then pulled out, and Palmer pulled out, and a lot of it. And you know, Villa don't do that, but I think it gets to a point where you've got to focus on the Villa first, really, because first and foremost, if you go through our injury list at the minute, what we expect he's probably injured. Kamara got injured against Liverpool, so Kamara's not fit to play on Saturday. Onana's not fit to play on Saturday. So I think we've really got to work for ourselves, sort of thing, and focus on ourselves first. And if somebody's so important to Villa, then we've got to say, like, look, like, you carrying this, or you've been doing this, you're not quite fit to play in this game. So I think that's just something that it's my personal view. I know Harry Kane is England first, and I think he's the captain in this, so he's obviously going to be fuming and say players should go, etc. If you're the captain, you're going to say that. But I think we've got to focus on us.
One of them for me. I think if you look at the Emi Martinez example, I think Villa, allowing him to play for Argentina all those times, maybe sometimes that we wouldn't have wanted him to, but I think that's a big draw for players to come to Aston Villa, in my opinion. We'll get you into your national side, and we'll let you play. So I think it's a good thing at times, but it's also a decision that Villa shouldn't have to be making. Like, do we really need a Nations League break right now? In my opinion, it shouldn't. Villa shouldn't be having to pull players out of international break right now, or any other team. I think maybe it's just the competition itself.
Yeah, so, and I think you are right. And I think going into like this next phase of the season, I think for me this is one of the most important parts of any season because of the amount of games that we have. So we want to be going into it with maximum players, and players that are fully fit and raring and ready to go. So yeah, we've had a good chat about Villa and the Emery way, the Emery brain, how it works, and his vision, and just what we should be sort of looking for, really. And I think we've been able to highlight the differences between this and last season. We've been able to look at some areas that we think probably needs to improve. And I think, we'll probably reevaluate then, I reckon, in Jan and see where we are. But hopefully you've all enjoyed this episode. If you have, make sure you are hitting the like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Earl, as always. Up the Villa.
Up the Villa.